Bonjour tout le monde.
Good morning to you all. I'm delighted to welcome you to this shareholders meeting of LVMH. I declare the meeting open and I thank you all for joining us here today. We have offered the possibility to shareholders later to ask questions, and we'll have a clip to show you about that. The scrutineers today are represented Christian Dior by Antoine Arnaud and Financière à Gages by Nicolas Bazil. As secretary, we have Jérôme Sibyl, our legal counsel. You're familiar with the agenda. I won't dwell on it. And this shareholders meeting, as we normally do, will be organized in the form of presentations, the figures, comments, discussion before the vote. Just a brief word before handing over to Mr. Guioni to stress that your company in 2022 achieved a record year. You have the figures shown here, and we have delivered results that make us extremely confident in the future, especially the group's potential. You have the results before you. These results are but a consequence of everyone's contribution. I'll return to that after Jean-Jacques Guioni on the figures, on what we view as essential. In other words, other things apart from figures. Over to you.
Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everyone. So some quick comments about the figures for the year 2022, also 2023, because we published the numbers for the first quarter. So starting with sales for 2022, the breakdown is more or less the same every year. So we look at organic growth, 17%. The structure impact was nil, unlike the previous year where we had consolidated Tiffany. So there was a major structure impact there, and a currency effect, a positive effect, 6%, and that was because of the US dollar against the main currencies, especially the euro. So we were close to 80,000 billion in sales last year. That is, of course, a record for Q1 of this year. What you have is we are sticking to the same trend, organic revenue up 17%, same trend as last year, but the difference is the currency effect is nil. Dollar is stable compared to last year at a high level. We're not complaining, but no structure impact either. So we're looking at 17% and 21 billion for Q1 in sales. If you look at the distribution of sales, last year, the main country is the United States, 27% of total sales. The main region is Asia, 30% of sales. There is a progress in Europe, 16%, and Japan is stable at 7%. In terms of distribution by business group, this is a general breakdown. You consider half the sales as fashion and leather goods, 20% in selective retailing, and the balance is distributed between the three business groups. Not much change from one year to the next. Now, but the more significant aspect is, of course, the growth in individual business groups. I'll just look at the right-hand column, which is organic growth. You can see that all our business groups enjoyed double-digit growth, which is significant. The main one, fashion and leather goods, is the group which enjoyed the fastest growth, up 20%. And you can see a rebound of selective retailing, which had suffered, of course, the lockdown 2 years running, 2020 and 2021. Sephora in particular went up, so 17% in organic growth. If you look at the other business groups, they did more than satisfactorily, with growth around 10 or more than 10%. If you look at the profits per se, we'll not return to revenue. So we have gross margin up 68.4%, which is something which we hadn't reached since 2021. Profit from recurring operations, which is the leading indicator, I'll get into the detail of that, was up 23%. So this is in line with revenue, which was up 23%. So it means that margin was stable compared to last year. You may remember that prior to the pandemic, margins stood at about 20 or 22%. So we made a step ahead at more than 26%, and we achieved that in 2021 and again in 2022. Other operating income and expenses, no comments, but the financial income, well, there's a degradation because of higher interest rates, but also there is the implicit capital gains that were down last year, whereas the previous year they were up. And so that's a significant gap, even though in economic terms it doesn't make much difference. But because stock prices went up, these potential capital gains caught up at the beginning of the year. So we have the taxes, about 5.3 billion, half of which is paid in France, and it is being said in France that the big luxury companies don't pay any taxes. Well, there you are. The group share of net profits upwards of 14 billion euros, up 17% as well. So a few words about profit from recurring operations, which is the main performance indicator, up 23% compared to last year. But each business group did well. Wines and spirits, fashion and leather goods, watches and jewelry, and especially selective retailing, which consolidated the turnaround in its business, not just in terms of revenue, but also in terms of profitability, up 50% in its profit margin. Now we'll turn to the next slide, looking at the operational improvement. Of course, the currency effect made a difference, but most of the improvement is related to organic growth, which is about 3 billion, and then less than 1 billion, around 1 billion in the currency effect. A few words about our balance sheet. The total is about 130 billion. Our own equity, which accounts for 42% of the total. The rest doesn't call for many comments. There were no major acquisitions to change the structure of the balance sheet. A few words about debt later on. Cash flow remained strong, 10 billion, up not quite the same level as 2021, which had been helped with the catch-up effect after the crisis. So cash flow stabilized the year. There were some assets sold in 2021 and some acquisitions, real estate in 2021. So cash flow, all in all, remained in good territory. And as you can see on this slide, you can see that the debt level is down. It stood at 9.6 billion now, 9.2 billion. 9.2 billion seems like a lot of money, but compared to equity, as you can see on the blue curve, it's 16% of equity. So the gearing at 16% is historically low, and of course we're not concerned at all in terms of solvency. Well, dividend, that's an important item because you will have to vote on that later on. We are proposing a dividend of 12 euros per share. There was an interim dividend of 5 euros, and so the balance will be paid the 7 euros if you vote on that next Thursday, up 20%, which is in line with the growth in net profit. And finally, I can't resist the pleasure of showing you the performance of the share price compared to the CAC 40 index. Since the beginning of 2021, we've been up 23%, whereas the index was only up 5%. And it would be even more flattering if you looked at the picture since the beginning of the year, since we're up almost 30%. Thank you for your attention.
Alors, avant de
Before moving to a brief review of the group's activities in 2022, I'd like to first of all say that the results just presented by Jean-Jacques Guillaume are the consequence of an outstanding work put in by our teams of craftspeople, our staff in stores, our management teams, our executives, and our creators. So before delving deeper into all that, I'd like to thank them warmly and congratulate them. There are a number of them who are in attendance, a number of group employees who are here and who are shareholders for that matter. We have a plan allowing a number of them to own shares, and I'd like to thank them for the extraordinary work put in during the course of 2022, and to stress that it's but a beginning and will continue in 2023. And we're off to a good start, because in 2023 the figures for the first quarter are good, or even very good, might one say, and that continues into April. Let's wait for the next steps, but it's off to a very good start. So for 2022, I'm informed that there are slides to show as per usual. There's one clip with the questions that were noted after a survey of shareholders, and another from an economist, Mr. Bouzou, on the position of LVMH in the French economy.
In 2022, the world underwent major geopolitical, social, and environmental upsets. In this context, you noted the group's strong resilience, marked by exceptional financial and stock exchange performances. In your capacity as shareholders, you're concerned about the consequences of the geopolitical situation and the pandemic. Were the strategy and the performance impacted? You believe that 2022 has confirmed the strategic course taken by the group this year, working with Yayoi Kusama, the appointment of Pharrell Williams as creative director for men at Vuitton, the gearing up of Tiffany & Co., the development of our activities in jewelries and wines and spirits, and the special days for LVMH had caught your attention. You're concerned that the group should show creativity and is showing a quest for excellence and creating value for all. You are turned to the future, showed great interest in environmental, social, and governance challenges. You hailed the strategic changes of the company and renewed your commitments to progress on environmental issues.
And now we move to the second clip on matters pertaining to the economy and LVMH in France and the world in general. Good morning. I'm delighted to be with you at this shareholders meeting. You may recall that last year at the shareholders meeting in 2022, I presented to the economic footprint of LVMH in France. Let me briefly remind you what the economic footprint is. A group like LVMH generates direct jobs, but also indirect economic effects, subcontractors, jobs, value added, everything that's linked to the consumption by LVMH employees, the knock-on effects. Indirect effects have a chain effect on the economy. When we looked at the direct, indirect, induced effects, we have the full footprint of a group. For LVMH, well, in fact, the figures were very spectacular. At national level, that footprint was about 145,000 jobs. If we look at payroll taxes, that's about 5 billion euros. So that was quite colossal. And this year, we've rolled out this exercise at local regional level. It's quite fascinating because we see the LVMH footprint is widely distributed geographically. Why is it important? Because in modern economies, there's a trend to growing conurbations. That is, the economy tends to create more wealth in the major towns, major cities. LVMH plays a role that runs counter to this natural tendency with economic footprints that are widely distributed across France. Take two examples to be very practical. First example is that of the Champagne region, 3 departments, l'Aisne, l'Aube et la Marne. The total footprint of LVMH in the Champagne region is 1.8 billion in revenue, 900 million euros of value added, and that represents over 5,000 jobs, 1.6% of salaried jobs in the private sector. It's the equivalent of the GDP of a town such as Épernay. Let's look at a second region, which is that of the Allier. Why Allier? Well, it's a territory in which LVMH is very present in terms of leather goods, and it's territory in the Auvergne-Rhône-Alpes region that experienced pretty strong deindustrialization, so it's significant to look at what LVMH can bring. If we look at the economic footprint in terms of jobs, it's 3%. The LVMH footprint accounts for over 3% of total jobs in that area. So you see, that's quite spectacular. We see that over and above economic matters, there's an aspiration by our citizens to be able to live in communities that are not just metropolitan areas, and that's why we wanted to conduct this study that showed there were groups such as LVMH that contribute to ensuring that the life, the economic and social life, can unfold across France.
Bon, effectivement, c'est très intéressant de...
Well, it's very interesting to see how the group is established across the regions of France and contributes to growing the number of jobs and developing French craftsmanship. And on that, we're extremely motivated and concerned, as Madame Chantal Camperlet will explain to us as Global Head of Human Resources, will explain about our Institute of Trades of Excellence, training craftspeople for the future of our businesses, for our companies, and who after training can move to other companies. So since the figures have already been extensively discussed, I think what's interesting to see in reviewing all our brands, at least for the most significant, is really the engine, as I believe I said last year, is our collective ability to create desirability through innovative products that are of outstanding quality, and particularly resistant, technically adapted, and fully suited to everything that is driven by the global constraint of protecting the environment, etc. And in the second presentation, Antoine will tell you about all the efforts we're undertaking in terms of manufacturing on these matters, which for all of us, for our employees, for our shareholders, for the environment in general are of the utmost importance. Turning now to the various business areas, let's start with the most important, which is fashion and leisure, leather goods, and the most important of our houses, of our maison, is Louis Vuitton. First of all, given that there has been a change in the management, I'd like to thank and congratulate Michael Burke, who's with us here today. Michael has done an extraordinary job. For 10 years,
C'est lui qui a permis.
he has allowed this iconic house. We never give the figures for each brand, but for once, it's the exception that confirms the rule. It is he who has carried this exceptional house above the 20 billion mark, which is a first in the history of the luxury sector. Louis Vuitton is now head by Pietro Beccari, who's also with us and who has brilliantly, for 5 years, developed the Maison Christian Dior, which today is taken up by Delphine and Charles de la Palme, who are also with us and have a major task ahead of them, which is to continue the wonderful expansion of the past 5 years initiated by Pietro and the design team for at least the next 5 years. So at Louis Vuitton, a great many things happened in 2022. Briefly, we opened several workshops, including that of Vendôme, that I urge you to all go and visit. It's extraordinary. It's in an 18th century building, quite magnificent, that has been totally rehabilitated, and we have created between 300 and 400 jobs locally, and all these buildings are designed with an eye to environmental standards, and we see that when we visit, to promote energy efficiency fully. And it's at Vendôme that we produce some of the most outstanding products of Louis Vuitton, all this done manually, and it's extremely impressive. In 2022, with Louis Vuitton, on the creative side, and with the cooperation of Nicolas Ghesquière, who's also been in the house for almost 10 years now, and who collaborated with Kusama, the Japanese artist who's quite iconic, with whom Vuitton had in fact worked already 15 years ago, and whose output in terms of the products are quite outstanding. You may have seen the facade on the Champs-Élysées, or that is at the Pont Neuf bridge on the Vuitton, with the these small pastilles that we find on all that. I'm not wearing the Kusama sneakers, but I was told to wear a tie. But normally we all wear these T-shirts with these little buttons on, and trainers. It changes every 6 months, but that's what we do, and it's quite successful because some of these products are out of stock. At Vuitton, we also organised a great many fashion shows. There's one next week that Pietro and Nicolas Ghesquière will be going to. That's in Seoul, and that would be pretty iconic, on a bridge that I visited a fortnight ago, where there's a Korean director I saw who's going to do a great presentation. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend because next week I'll be at the opening of the Tiffany store in New York. That's also set to be quite an outstanding event. Let's also mention another very important development at Louis Vuitton. Pharrell Williams, as head of design for the men's collection. We've known Farrell for a long time. He's worked previously with Louis Vuitton. This week we had the first outline of the collection to be presented in June. It looks extremely interesting. I'd also like to mention that occurred last week, the opening of the Vienna store. That's absolutely amazing. If you go to Vienna, it's a great city. Don't miss the Louis Vuitton store in Vienna. And in passing, mentioning Louis Vuitton, big success this year and last year of the Louis Vuitton fund with the Money Mitchell show, record number of visitors. I'm sure some of you were able to tour that exhibition, the quality of the works, to parallel and show in perspective the Monet paintings, quite outstanding. There was a triptych Monet had not managed to sell at the beginning of the last century that was sold in 3 sections to 3 different U.S. museums. The first time that the 3 paintings were brought together, it was about 14 meters long, quite exceptional, with the Mitchell works and counterpoint. It was quite magnificent. And now it's Warhol Basquiat. Great success for the Louis Vuitton founder. That's for Vuitton. Turning to Dior, that continues to go from strength to strength. Let's mention an exhibition that we saw together a fortnight ago, Tokyo. Christian Dior, designer of dreams, wonderful. It's the finest Dior show that I've ever seen, and it's very successful. It sold out through to the end of the show, and it's an exhibition that will then travel with an outstanding director. And then we have the incredible concept store of Dior in Seoul, and of course last year, it seems a long time ago, it was a year ago, the opening of 30th on Avenue Montaigne, 30 Montaigne, up until the opening of Tiffany. It's probably the finest luxury store in another week, and then have to continue on that same upward trend. Dior has totally surrounded, wrapped with the gingerbread during the vacation. There was a little Dior cafe. It was wonderful. And then the show at the foot of the pyramids at Seville, at Seoul, and the latest Mumbai in India. Quite magnificent. So that's for the 2 most iconic fashion houses. The others are also faring well, expanding well. Celine, that, as I announced here, as we topped the 2 billion revenue during the year 2022, and it's close to the 3 billion mark, and that's a consequence. I mean, these figures are but a consequence of the appeal of our products. And what is I find very encouraging is that Celine today in the fashion houses is ranked 5th in terms of desirability, the first 4 being Vuitton, Dior, and then there are 2 competitors that I won't mention. I don't want to advertise the competition. You can imagine what those brands are. And then in 5th place, Celine. That's quite extraordinary. Another brand that is also growing strongly, smaller, Loewe, with Jonathan Anderson, who's also a designer full of potential, and a brand that's extremely successful, that's not really on the same operating model, but which produces clothes of surprising quality and is becoming increasingly desirable. Laurent Piana, the figures are up I won't review all the houses because it would take us all morning, but let's now move to beauty. Well, there again, a major change in beauty management, and I'd like also to thank, first of all, Claude Martinez, who managed beauty for LVMH for a great many years, and who now, and I'd like to thank him because the success of Dior, I mean, is down to him. He's delivered that success in very large part, and he will now move to our activity of research and development of new products, new research centers. We had a few difficulties with the research center that we were going to set up next to the École Polytechnique. I won't go into the details of all that. It would take too long, but French, what they are, they came that it wasn't a good thing to have a capitalist company setting up shop there where we wanted to invest 100 million, hire 100 scientists. No, they said it's best for the state to do that. It's an empty field with a few frogs leaping about here and there, and we'll see in 20 years' time if they've done something with it. We decided to cut our losses, and we're moving elsewhere where we're well received. And in fact, we were invited to go to other countries in the UK, prestigious universities, not only to welcome us and subsidize us. We're good French. We're going to stay in France in spite of all the criticism leveled here and there. We remain attached to France. Just to say that in passing. So Claude Martinez will be supervising all that, and our beauty activities are headed up by Stéphane Rinnerknecht, to whom I wish very best wishes for success for these iconic brands that he is now supervising, and whose success in a number of countries is quite remarkable. The place in Japan where we went recently, LVMH and Dior in particular, is the leading brand of beauty products, perfumes, cosmetics, care products sold in Japan, ahead of a group that we know a bit, L'Oréal, but is way behind with its products. I don't want to be unkind. It's a fine company, even if it's smaller. It's a fine company. But be that as it may, it's pretty good, and we're expanding. We're developing hugely the appeal and desirability that makes Dior a brand that's among the, for many countries, ranked top in France, Japan, in the UK. Perfumes and products. We have an extraordinary perfume. Sauvage is the world's leading fragrance. It was launched barely 4 or 5 years ago and is growing strongly. I could, of course, talk about that activity for a very long time. I'd like to welcome the arrival of Véronique Courtois, the head of the Dior brand. Véronique's been with us for quite some time. She was previously the CEO of Guerlain, knows Dior very well because she's worked at Dior Parfum for many years, and is now in charge of the brand globally. Wines and spirit, another iconic business that is doing well. With it was very successful, notably with champagne. Certain parts of the world, when we go to a restaurant, the owners come and see me. So we'd like some bottles of Dom Perignon because we don't have enough the shows, but the quantity being limited, we can't invent more, but it shows the success of French champagne brands, and we've extended our scope to Felth, a U.S. vineyard in California, and this It dates back a few years now and was strengthened recently, where the leading producer of rosé of Provence. And Rosé de Provence is a wine that is growing strongly, notably in the United States, with Chateau d'Esclans that produces this amazing rosé Whispering Angel, which is #1 on the American market, and the acquisition of Minuti that we've just finalized. That's also an absolutely iconic brand. Moving to watch making, that continues to show great vitality, headed by Stefan Bianchi in a masterful manner. And the watchmaking business, since we've combined watchmaking under his leadership, it's a significant activity for the group that's very profitable and is innovating in many areas of watchmaking and jewelry. I mentioned the Tiffany store, that's iconic, but also Bulgari stores that were opened and that are absolutely remarkable. And these watchmaking products are, for the most part, manufactured in our workshops. We have watchmaking workshops that are very impressive, both at Tag Heuer, Zenith, Bulgari, and at Vuitton, for that matter, because at Vuitton and Jean heads up the watches division, and we're very successful with extraordinary watches, which are really sold in small quantities, very expensively priced. I won't say the price, but certain series only 10 items, very complex, minute repetition. We won't go into all that in detail, but it's hugely impressive. I believe the workshop Fabrique du Temps in Geneva for Vuitton watches is very impressive and can be visited. We can organize visits if some of you are interested to that workshop. That I visited it quite recently. It's truly remarkable. It's well worth a visit. Very impressive indeed. At Hublot, too, there's a cooperation with Murakami that worked very well, that delivers some magnificent watches and great potential both in watches and jewelry. This brings me to selective retailing with Sephora in particular. La Puente, who heads up this business in a masterly fashion, and Sephora currently, since last year, well before, is very successful, posting excellent growth, gaining market share, growing strongly on the US market. And we also have linked to that exclusive brands, at least at the launch. Sephora Fenty, that's the brand that we launched with Rihanna, who was in our offices yesterday and attended the board meeting. She's remarkable. In addition to her outstanding talent in music, she looks at everything in detail, and her brand is growing strong with sales are up 50% on the US market, making it one of the most leading makeup brands in the United States and also in France. If you go to the Sephora store on the Champs-Élysées, you see the Fenty store. There's always a crowd around it. It's very impressive. So there are, of course, a great many more things to say, but I was asked to be brief. Very good.
Voilà. Tout ça quand même souligner.
I would like to stress, as Mr. Bouzou did, in passing, the outstanding economic footprint of LVMH. Of course, since business is doing well, since the results are good, and the share price, and I hope our shareholders approve, I'm sure they are, for that matter, is rising quite significantly. It's not guaranteed that it always remain at an all-time high, but for the moment, it's faring very well. Well, in France, of course, we're criticized. What? How is it possible? What's happening? It's not normal. That's something. And then, as Guillaume was saying, well, not paying any taxes. It's the opposite. We're paying the most taxes in France. And then I was told, are they hiring people? Yes, yes. 15,000 people hired in 2022. And in France, we have 40,000 employees. All those that in the companies working for the group were 160,000. I was hearing a politician, I don't want to engage in politics here, but people are pretty inconsequential, saying, well, it's shameful for France, all these groups, luxury produces pointless products, so we should scrap the business. Okay, but does that gentleman know how many employees we're talking about in France? 1 million people. Here we have a so-called responsible politician who blatantly says, scrap a business that employs million people. So we're opening sites. I've mentioned many in France. We're investing over 1 billion euros every year. Corporate income tax, we pay 5 billion in taxes worldwide, half in France. 90% of products made by the group exported outside France. That's what I can say briefly on that, but Mr. Bouzou explained that very clearly. Now, these successes are truly remarkable. I'd just like to end my presentation. What does it rest on? On the group's values. I would like to recall them. Firstly, creativity, innovation, the fact that we were capable of attracting and retaining and working with the most influential, the most gifted and outstanding designers of our time. It's not always easy. It's not always easy to get a polytechnicien to work with a creator, with a designer, because sometimes there's a clash of cultures. I won't give you any examples here, but that's how we can judge the ability of the engineer in question to adapt to the company long term, because if the clash is too strong, as happened, well, there are some who don't resist the shock and who after 6 months say, well, sorry, sir, we can no longer with work, who doesn't turn up to the meeting, or that tomorrow morning I'm off to Namibia, whereas we had organized a meeting together. It doesn't always work, but when it does work, this mix between this outstanding creativity and a certain logical mindset, because engineers normally have a pretty logical mindset, it can work together. Second value is the quest for excellence in everything we accomplish, and it will be in the stores, in the way we present our products, produce them to ensure that our customers are impressed. I mentioned watches earlier. It goes for leather goods. It goes for our care products, perfumes. It applies to jewelry, the high-end jewelry at Tiffany, that customers are impressed by the quality of the products. And that goes also for wines that are always outstanding. The third values I've mentioned on several is our spirit of enterprise. LVMH isn't a normal company. It's not kind of a joint stock company as some are. It's a family-owned company in which I want to make sure that all participants are not considered like employees, but those who execute, but as family members, that they're attached to the group as we are indeed attached to them. And they're pleased what they do. They bring their skills, their qualities to the group, but they feel they are an environment that looks after them. And Chantal's going to explain to you how we seek to share this family spirit with all our employees so that they feel motivated. At the same time, we nurture the spirit of enterprise, entrepreneurship, agility, responsiveness. We're not too fond of bureaucracy. Well, there isn't very much. A little, but not too much. Because when we have to look after deal with legal issues or accounting, there's necessarily a smidgen of bureaucracy, but we try and contain that to channel them towards efficiency. We have a CFO who's extremely agile and manages to get all that to operate without too many having to fill out too many forms, reports, or briefs to read in detail. And lastly and finally, the most important, the group's engagement, the fact that the group has a positive impact, obviously a positive impact, and Antoine will return to all the major issues of our time, the environment, the protection of the ecosystem, a sense of responsibility in respective communities where we're present, social responsibility. We're building and hiring for our workshops. We have various foundations. We have the Life Foundation that Chantal will tell you about, that brings our contribution so as to allow people who have fallen on hard times to return to employment. I saw that in Roubaix recently, the fact that we have been able to attract people who were totally marginalized, and 80% of them find a job. It's not our activity, but we contribute to it. We help to build it, but that it's crucially important for the motivation of our teams to know that group isn't just creating products, delivering results that are quite exceptional, but also to look after one's environment and one's social environment. That's what I briefly wish to say. Over now to Chantal Grandperlé, who'll tell you in greater detail about all these matters of social responsibility, training, recruitment, before Antoine tells you about our activity to preserve the environment, how we can address this major challenge today, which is to combat global warming. Thank you.
There are three trends in the global economy: fragmentation, climate change, and a new trend, which is technological change. Fragmentation first is due to the rivalry between China and the United States from an economic standpoint, but also in terms of trade, technology, and there's a monetary rivalry. There's also the war in the Ukraine, which brought about a significant geopolitical change and a new balance towards China. The war in the Ukraine also brought about inflation. The second trend is the climate transition and the loss of biological diversity. Many countries on Earth now have set for themselves carbon neutral targets, and this means this will require innovation. The third trend is to do with new technologies, in particular artificial intelligence. This enables us to be almost knowledgeable about everything, to be faster, but this also means that education and training and continuous training, creativity are becoming more and more important, so education is key to the future. Now, in the context of deep changes around the world, there are three major challenges for companies, for large companies. First, related to geopolitical fragmentation, the fact that value chains and supply chains will be more and more fragmented and will reflect geopolitical, environmental, and social challenges rather than economic criteria. And so major companies will have to adjust to remain resilient in this new environment. The second challenge is to do with climate change and the loss of biodiversity. There, major companies will have to set an example and be transparent in terms of energy consumption and CO2 emissions. They'll have to change their modes of production, but will also have to allow for a better consumption and carbon and low carbon modes. And finally, the third challenge is to do with technological change, and there companies will have to support their employees and help them take a new look to their own work, their own tasks, looking for meaning. Big companies will have to be involved in the continuous training of adults, developing creativity, and that will be major challenges for the labor force and people involved in creative processes in years to come because of technological change. Good morning, everyone. 2022 was a record year in financial terms, but it was also a record year in terms of human resources. The group now claims 196,000 employees, and we recruited 61,000 talents around the world, up 35% compared to 2021. We were well aware of the situation of the younger generation that bore the brunt of the pandemic, and so we recruited 25,000 people under the age of 30. In fact, we were able to hire as many as 39,000 young people, including 9,500 interns and apprentices. So that's a record recruitment in a constantly changing world, where the role of training, continuous training, lifelong training is key. And we have been making major investments in there, supporting our employees with a development and innovation program, the DARE initiative, which calls on our employees to generate new ideas. And that brought as many as 2,700 projects in 5 years, 50 of which are incubating, and 20 have now become operational. And the fact that you can have a career and new development opportunities has been attracting talents, and this is a major asset for the company. Last year, we had a record 6,500 promotions, internal promotion, up 17% compared to 2021. Our trades, our know-how are at the heart of our success, and to advertise this, to create new interest, we went to 5 cities in France with basketball star Tony Parker with 1,200 jobs on offer. We're completing the second edition of this tour, which is becoming more and more successful. As Mr. Arnaud pointed out, we also have the Institute of Trades of Excellence, and that has continued its growth, broke its own record last year with 450 new apprentices compared to 350 in 2021 in 7 countries, and so the total number of apprentices is 2,000, trained to 30 trades through 42 programs since the inception of this institute in 2014. These achievements are based on convictions and values that define our vision and our human resource policies. Long-term vision, meritocracy, commitment, diversity, and inclusion. And in this respect, we've made headway on women leaders because 45% of we have 45% of women in key positions, 18 heading our houses, and we've made a commitment to wage equality by 2025. We've had as many as 130 actions and initiatives for gender equity and inclusion within the group and its houses, and we formalized this commitment when we signed the LGBT+ and the Autre Cercle Charter. And so I was telling you about the long-term vision. Commitments for social responsibility are proof to this. We are strengthening our action year after year, and there are major results to show for this. I'll give you the example of LIVE, the Institute of Vocations for Employment. Now, LIVE offers an innovative training method customized to help people who had no training whatsoever and were left out of the labor market. Since 2019, we started as many as 4 campuses in France, one in Clichy-sous-Bois, then Valence, Roubaix, and last month in Marseille. By the end of 2023, we'll have 1,100 people who were able to help and support. And we're proud of the results because more than 80% of these people were able to find jobs. Regarding health and safety for our employees, the executive committee of the group and the heads of divisions signed the health and safety charter, providing a sound working environment for our employees. That commitment made it possible to improve our health indicators and significantly reduce the number of accidents on the job. And we also have good results with the LVMH Heart Fund. This was created in 2021 to help people facing adversity. And last year, that enabled us to help as many as 4,000 employees in 50 countries. They had some form of financial assistance or social and psychological support. Ladies and gentlemen, dear shareholders, in a highly competitive labor market, looking for skilled talent, we have to look after our human capital. It is our men and women who make all the difference. This has been our conviction at LVMH, and once again, they showed this last year. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Chantal. And now we'll show a clip, and then I'll give the floor to Antoine Arnaud.
Des journées particulières.
This is the 5th edition of Les Journées Particulières, Special Days.
Bonjour à tous.
Good morning, everyone. These are moving recollections of these special days. We had as many as 2,000 visitors last weekend. We started a new operation called Live 360. These are ambitious, pragmatic, and significant projects on biodiversity, climate, the circular economy, and biodiversity. I'm proud to show the achievements of which we can all be proud. The environment is a business for us all. Almost all houses have a dedicated action plan contributing to Life 360 with clear commitments for the years 2023, 26, and 2030. All operational functions are involved. The procurement division, looking at the environmental footprint of raw materials, logistics, looking for a low-carbon production, shipping of products, the IT department for responsible digital environment, creation offers using recycled fibers, or leather tailings for desirable and lasting products. 196,000 employees around the world have actions for environment, cleanliness, and are trained to new techniques such as eco-design. And this has given visible results. We can see this on our main brands. Biodiversity, we are limiting the impacts of nature. In Turkey with Stella McCartney, Fendi, and Vuitton, we are supporting our cotton supplier using regenerating agriculture and achievements in 2 years. Less water consumed, less inputs, and better improvement in soils. In Chad, we are fighting desertification, helping 500 farmers deploy sustainable methods for cotton as part of Circular Bioeconomy Alliance created in 2020 by His Highness Charles III when he was Prince of Wales. In Australia, we are helping our suppliers for Merinos wool, having breeding that can regenerate pasturing land. Louis Vuitton has a partnership with People Wildlife to contribute to the preservation of natural habitat for 400,000 hectares. In France, in Grasse Parfum, Christian Dior cultivates roses with special species for the quality of soils. In Champagne, Moët Hennessy pursues its programs with living soils, with protection of the top soil and its vineyards. In Ecuadorian Amazon, we contribute to the restoration of the forest cover, developing local economy with natural medicine. In Amazon in Brazil, working with UNESCO, we have a reforestation programs. Our team is just back, and must say that the testimony from these people show that this is very useful indeed. For biodiversity, we act for the climate. Forests and soils are carbon sinks. There are other ways to become involved in the climate effort. Since 2022, in September, we mobilized for carbon neutrality or energy neutrality, low carbon energy, with reducing the consumption of electricity in our shops, our workshops, and our sites. Immediate effects. Sephora, for instance, in France, cut its energy consumption by 19% in its shops and offices between October and December 2022. Of course, managing shops in malls is more complicated, and so we have an unprecedented partnership with the owner of a shopping mall in China, Hang Long Properties, with actions for low carbon energy, low energy consumption. We have, on the carbon footprint, we're working with one of the major players of SAF, Sustainable Aviation Fuel. This is a biofuel that reduces by 80% CO2 emissions compared to standard kerosene aviation fuel. Biodiversity has reduced its environmental footprint to make products more desirable. Christian Dior Couture has started a men's collection with ONG Parley for the oceans. The whole collection is developed using textiles with high performance and recycling marine debris. Guerlain reinvented its emblematic collection Aqua Allegoria by reducing its carbon footprint by 80%, 60% with a new recharge module. And the second skin of Renard is Veuve Clicquot with low carbon packaging made with recycled paper and hemp. Nonosource, a platform to resell unused textiles, confirm its status in circular economy. 190,000 meters of fabric were upcycled. In 2022, we preserved or rehabilitated 1.37 million of hectares for wildlife and flora. The growth of the group goes hand in hand with a lower carbon footprint compared to 2019, 11% down in carbon emissions in Scope 1 and 2, 15% in Scope 3. The certification rate of our main supply chains by high standards are guaranteeing ethical standards and significant gains in 2022. Sustainable development and continuous program remains to be achieved, but we have a AAA grade water biodiversity climate, and we are comforted in this strategy. I'm delighted to show you the progress achieved so far. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, and now I'll give the floor to the auditors.
Thank you, Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, shareholders. Good morning on behalf of the auditors. Mazar, I'm prepared to present the results. The reports that we've drawn up for your attention in respect of FY 2022 were made available to you ahead of this shareholders meeting. I therefore propose to summarize the key points. Our reports are 7 in number. A report on the annual financial statements, 1 on the consolidated financial statements, 1 on the related party agreements. Lastly, 4 reports regarding transactions on the share capital. I'll begin with the report of our on the financial statements. That's the first resolution. They are prepared under French GAAP, and we considered that the evaluation of equity investments and provisions for contingencies and losses were the key audit matters. In conclusion, we certified these financial statements without any reservation or observation. Turning now to the consolidated financial statements drawn up under IFRS, we considered that the 3 following matters were the key audit matters: the valuation of fixed assets, the valuation of inventories and work in progress, and provision for contingencies and losses and uncertain tax positions. In our opinion, the consolidated financial statements give a true and fair statement of the company and prompted no observation. Turning now to the 4th resolution of your shareholders meeting, we issued a report on regulated party agreement. No new related party agreement was brought to our attention during the past year. The agreements authorized in prior years and which remained in force in 2022 were also presented in our special report. Lastly, in respect of the extraordinary part of your shareholders meeting, we've issued 4 reports concerning reports that might in the future have an impact on your share capital. These are authorization to decrease the share capital, to increase the share capital, to grant stock subscription or stock options to employees and/or corporate officers, and an authorization to increase the share capital for the benefit of employees who are members of a corporate savings plan. Our reports contain no comments on these transactions, which comply with the conditions provided by the French Commercial Code. Ladies and gentlemen, Chairman, thank you for your attention. Well, ladies and gentlemen, before we move to questions, I realize that I've omitted 2 points. The first being the most important is to thank Sidney Toledano, who's been with me for over 20 years now. Correct? Well, I've had almost 30 years. I didn't want to accentuate your grey hair, but be that as it may, I'd like to stress the exceptional, outstanding work. He's not going to leave. He's not leaving. He'll be taking up other duties. He's done remarkable work when he headed up Christian Dior, because he led Christian Dior for a very long period of time. And as he is still in charge of the fashion group, to which a whole set of brands belong to, those that I cited, including Celine. And we'll continue to work together in a different setting. I won't say any more. We'll come to that next year. But a very big thank you to you, Sidney, for all the work over these past few years. Also, another point that I wish to mention in the slightly smaller brand, there's one that's shining currently, Berluti. Amazing shoes, especially products for men, to go and visit the Berluti stores and to try on a pair of shoes. You'll see they're really amazing. I remember the first time when we acquired this company, that's going back quite a while, I went to visit it. And back then, there was the founder, Olga Berluti, who was in the store. And I said, well, really like to try on a pair of your shoes. So, very good. I'll sit down and please remove your shoes. She looks at my foot and off she goes without asking, without measuring anything, just by looking at my foot. She came back with precisely the right shoe. I thought that was extraordinary, so I bought the business. Of course, she was selling, naturally. And since these are amongst the finest shoes in the world. Let's now move to questions. Firstly, to Tony, because there are a few written questions that he's going to answer before taking questions from the room. Because there is a buffet being served, isn't there? Oh, there's no buffet lunch. Oh, savings are everywhere. That's the CFO for you. That's the financial. I won't ask you if there's a gift. You'll probably say, oh, there is a gift. Rest assured. Tony. Good morning to you all. I'd now like to answer a few questions that represent the topics that were brought to our attention, written in writing. First question concerns our sales policy. What's your development strategy as regards omni-channel sales and marketing for the various houses? The digital world is henceforth part of our lives, added to the physical world, and the two dimensions to the contact between our houses and customers reflects that reality. Social network, place of information, networking and sharing, shows in stores a unique experience opportunity. The 30 Montaigne of the Maison Dior already cited is both a boutique, a maison, restaurant, hotel, a magical place. The integration of the two dimensions offers a richer opportunity for expression, the development of new digital technology, data enhancement, and AI will allow us to personalize the offering and make transactions more seamless. The stores will rival in creativity to offer moments of emotion, experience to be shared on social media, and to nurture the desirability of our brands. The new flagship of Tiffany, to be opened next week, will be the finest example of that. Second question concerns the value created by the group. What's the value that the group has created, and what steps do you plan to take to better share the value to the benefit of employees? The added value is what corresponds to the value that the company creates. It's not the wealth of a company, it's not its profit, it's a bit more complex because it's the difference between sales and intermediary consumptions, what we need to produce, such as, for example, the raw materials. But the added value is also the contribution of the group to the global gross national product. In other words, it's our ability to transform a piece of leather into a lasting and iconic product. To take the 2022 figures, group revenue total 79 billion euros. The added value of the group in 2022 reached 38 billion euros, but this sum is just but a starting point because of those 38 billion, we haven't yet paid our employees, nor paid our taxes, nor invested. So let's agree on the, let's look at the distribution in detail. 9.6 billion, that's about a quarter of the 38 billion, are reinvested in our value chains, businesses and communities. It's what allows us, for example, to open new manufacturers in France and Italy, as we did in 2022 with Louis Vuitton at Vendôme or with Fendi close to Florence. This can, of course, serve for future investments to strengthen still further our capacity to manufacture or preserve savoir-faire, know-how that have unique value when it concerns the manufacture and preservation of our products. Secondly, over 11.2 billion, almost 30% of this value added, is returned directly to employees in the form of salary, also bonus, as well as profit sharing in France. Notably, third component, 9.4 billion euros, still about a quarter of this value added goes back to the state in the form of various taxes. We're the number one tax contributor in France, paying the highest corporation tax. And then the remainder, about 20%, is returned to shareholders, essentially in the form of dividends. And there's a group reserve here because we've always sought to maintain the growth of the dividend. That's the reality of our contribution of a group that shows the broad balance in the distribution of value added between employees, the state, the company, and shareholders. This testifies to our commitment in respect of employees, whom I'd like to hail the incredible work and devotion, and to the company as a whole, in particular in France, whilst, of course, supporting long-term growth, which is our prime concern and the necessary precondition to continue with all our engagements. The third question, lastly, was received from people for ethical treatment of animals. Are we going to abandon the use of fur and exotic skins? It's a recurring question on their part. Our position has not changed since the last time we received a question from PETA on that and put at last year's shareholders meeting. We're convinced that natural raw materials constitute a pressure good and that contribute to outstanding and lasting products of our maison. We're in favor of freedom of choice. Some of our customers continue to desire and buy these types of products. Our houses can therefore select the materials that they use in their design process, but they must do so whilst scrupulously comply with the code of practice we have governing animal raw materials, and we've worked with a scientific committee comprised of independent experts. This charter sets out the various standards and long-term commitments in 3 areas: traceability, animal well-being, and the respect for local populations, environment, and biodiversity. Back in 2019, we set a traceability target of 100% by 2025 for these raw materials. Furthermore, we continue to study all alternative solutions, notably that of plant-based leather. We're working in this Micro works with the Deserto startup that won the Innovation Award for LVMH in 2020 for its cactus-based leather. Stella McCartney at the cutting edge of this development, and other houses are working with scientific institutions to find virtuous solutions based on alternative materials. Thank you.
Mesdames, Messieurs, maintenant nous...
Ladies and gentlemen, we're now available to take your questions if there are any. The vote on the resolutions is quite important. We'll try and take questions for about 10-15 minutes. Let's start with question 5 over there. I'd ask you to introduce yourself before you ask your question, please.
Bonjour.
Good morning. I work for EPA. This is the Association for Individual Shareholders. First of all, congratulations on these outstanding performance. Shareholders can always decide on which share to purchase, but the LVMH share has a desirability criterion. I have 3 quick questions. Number 1, what are you expecting in terms of financial returns? What are you expecting of the new contract with Denis Estanguet, who chairs the organization committee of the Olympics for 2024 in Paris? Gérard Genda, the clock company, has now a new agreement with you. Is that to mean that you're going to focus on large complications on small numbers of watches? And then returning back to basketball, you said last year that selling virtual basketball shoes was not a move of development, but last year you've decided to get engaged in NFTs, non-fungible tokens. Is that a way of fighting counterfeits? Because NFTs do produce certificates of authenticity, or is this because of this excitement that it is impossible not to become engaged in NFTs? For the first question regarding the Olympics in Paris, well, the contract you have mentioned has not been signed yet. It's still being negotiated, and as in any talks, well, you may or may not end up signing the contract, and so watch this space. Regarding Gérard Genta, that is indeed an iconic brand, and we, just like we purchased Bulgari, this brand was transferred to Louis Vuitton in the Fabrique du Temps. I won't say much about this, but one interesting factor, we haven't presented the product yet, and already for the first model, which is to be built in 100 copies altogether, it's all sold out already. So customers are so keen, so interested in the know-how of Fabrique Vuitton, which is now recognized worldwide as one of the very best workshops making watches in the world. And the brand, I mean, the creator, I mean, we can mention remarkable competitors, but he created Piguet, he created Patex's Nautilus, so he's the greatest creator of timepieces ever. And we were fortunate when we bought his brand. We bought with it the entire history, all the archives, and so we have a remarkable heritage there. And we're very confident on the future development of that brand. Regarding basketball shoes, we do not sell virtual basketball shoes. What we use when we have NFTs, we sell an actual shoe with its NFT, just like with bottles of wine. You can purchase a bottle with an NFT, but the bottle of cognac or whatever it is, the house will keep for you in its cellars. And when you decide to sell it back or indeed to consume it, you turn that NFT, this virtual NFT, into the actual bottle which you own. That's how it works. So there's an actual product being sold. There's another question now. Number one. Good morning, sir, and dear shareholders. I would like to congratulate you on this outstanding performance, but I would like to thank you not to present your results the same day as L'Oréal, because 99% of LVMH shareholders are also L'Oréal shareholders. Well, that's good news. Well, we cannot be everywhere at the same time, so just as well you didn't have the announcement on the same day. I see that, I read in Les Echos that the big challengers are China and India. What is your take on India? There are poor people in India, but lots of millionaires as well. Well, India has overtaken China in terms of number of inhabitants, but not in terms of GDP. And India is, by and large, a poor country, unlike China, which has enjoyed significant economic growth over the past 30 years. So there's no way the Indians can acquire LVMH products, unlike China. We did have a fashion show in India because India is still iconic in terms of receptions and such like, but India is not a country where we can have a network of luxury shops. Other questions? If there are no further... Oh, no, there's another question, yes. Good morning, sir, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, my name is Jean-Lev Silib. I'm an individual shareholder. I would like to congratulate you, not just on your great performance, but this morning's presentation. I have a technical question. If you look at the price share of LVMH, which is about 900 euros per share, and it's still going up, whereas the market is going down, especially for long-standing shareholders comparing the purchase price with the current price. But as René Soulange said, this has becoming a desirable share, which in financial terms makes it a bit heavy. Are you considering a splitting of the share to make this share more affordable? Dear sir and shareholder, I will disappoint you, but we believe that desirability is proportional to the value, so we don't propose to split it. The share itself has become a luxury good.